Okay.
So, hi, everyone. This is Jenny from Miami Mood Podcast, and I am so excited to welcome someone whose company I have admired for quite some time now, Brian Goulet. Thank you, Brian, for being here with us.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This is a treat.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. So, let's start at the beginning. And I have to say, I did some research on you and Goulet Pens. So I know a little bit of the background, and it made me even more appreciative of everything that you guys have done. But tell us a little bit about how Goulet Pens was born.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'll try to give the concise version. I'm not the best at summarizing things. I tend to give too much detail. But anyway, so basically, the long and short of it is it was kind of almost by accident that I got into fountain pens. I did not grow up with them. I didn't have like a long-standing passion for them. It was really a process of discovery for me. So I had recently graduated from college. My wife and I were newly married, and I was looking basically to just do something for fun as a hobby in my downtime. And I wanted to do woodworking because I've been doing woodworking for a while, and I've always enjoyed that. And so, you know, what do you do when you live in an apartment and you're trying to do woodworking? It's not so easy. So I bought a small lathe and I started turning pens out of wood because it was just small and quiet enough to be able to do in that apartment. And that kind of parlayed this hobby that I was basically trying to just fund my hobby. I started selling pens and things like that. It wasn't even fountain pens, just regular ballpoint pens and stuff made out of wood. So that, you know, I ended up selling them to some companies that were engraving them for, you know, corporate gifts and stuff like that. And this was in like the 2007, 2008 timeframe. And then the economy then really kind of tanked with the housing crisis in 2008 and all that. All corporate like gift market just completely, the bottom dropped out, and I lost all my potential clients. So I was basically looking around like, well, who the heck is buying pens, you know? And I was like, there's got to be some group of people that's passionate about pens. And that's what led me to people that are into fountain pens. And I was like, this is a really kind of a strange, weird world. I was aware of fountain pens, but I didn't really get it. And it was through that process of discovery, you know, through like physical gatherings, like they have like basically, you know, kind of like Comic-Con type things for fountain pens, much smaller scale. But, you know, and then I found some forums and blogs and other things like that. And I was just like, wow, this is really cool. And I was like, you know, how do, you know, people that didn't grow up with fountain pens, how do they get to know how to use them and experience, you know, an enhanced writing experience? And I was like, trying to discover that for myself and found it very difficult. There was a lot of friction in the process. There was information out there, but it was very piecemeal on different forums and stuff like that. You had to really, really, really try to learn how to use fountain pens. And so I just kind of said, well, okay, they are pretty cool. There's a passionate group of people trying to use these fountain pens. And, you know, there's a kind of a high barrier to entry for new people getting into it. Plus, you know, this was kind of like social media was like up and coming, and it was not nearly as mainstream as it is now. And I just kind of saw like, okay, this is a potential, you know, avenue to share about fountain pens, you know, potentially, you know, get more people to know about me and what I'm trying to do with pens. You know, originally I was trying to make wood pens and do my thing. I don't make them anymore for a variety of reasons. They're not ideal the way I was making them. But through essentially becoming an influencer, before that was the word that came to be around that, I was producing content, blogging and producing YouTube videos. I posted my first YouTube video in 2010, you know, so I've been doing this for a little while. Yeah, it was like, that's
amazing.
There was a limit of 10 minutes of an upload on YouTube videos, if that tells you anything of how long ago this was. So I had to chop up my videos into different parts if it was longer than 10 minutes and so on. So it was still fairly new at that point, but I saw the potential for it. I saw the advantage of sharing this on, you know, free platforms basically, and had kind of a vision for, you know, having an e-commerce store around fountain pen products and then sharing content around it, getting new people into it. And that's largely worked out fairly well. And we've just kind of been doing that and growing ever since.
That's amazing. What I love about what you guys do is the education component too.
Oh,
You
yeah.
have so much content just helping people choose the right pen and why should they even be into fountain pens.
Yeah.
Was that an easy process for you to become an educator in a way?
I mean, not necessarily. I'm a big proponent of, doing what kind of feels most natural. For me, being on video felt fairly natural because I did show choir in high school. I did marching band in high school and college. So I was used to a degree performing, but I'm not a good actor. Like I tried doing some theater type stuff, and I can't memorize lines to save my life. But I'm personable, I'm conversational, and I love to just share things that I learned that I'm excited about. So for me, it was very natural to be learning about these fountain pens, something really new, and then turning it around and sharing it with others. That enthusiasm comes through. I'm sharing good information. You get a feedback loop from the community, from our audience, through comments and other things that people reach out to us. So, to me, that was just really exciting to just, put out some content to our community and say, hey, here you go. What do you think? What else do you want to know? What products are you interested in that you can't find or can't find good information on? And then we would go and produce around that. And it was like, wow, this is just incredible, as opposed to trying to dream up something and with no guidance as to what it was, because before that I was trying to cold call to companies to sell corporate gifts and all that. And it just always felt like it was a grind, because I'm not a salesman. Like I've done commission sales stuff. Like I worked at Radio Shack when I was in high school and stuff. And I'm not a good salesman.
Radio Shack.
I know, right? I think they're still around.
I forgot that place existed.
I was selling like cell phones and DirecTV and stuff like that. But it was like, I'm not a good commission sales guy. So, but things that I'm passionate about, I can produce a video and all that. And so I just saw such a need for it in the pen community. It was a really great group of people who are into them. And I was just like, wow, it was like all the stars kind of aligned. And so that to me was what was really exciting, is that, I just saw, after trying, so many things that weren't really working on the pen making side back when I was doing that, I kind of pivoted that a little bit and I said, okay, well, I'm not woodworking. I'm not, kind of doing my original vision, but, there's a really desperate need for this type of content. I kind of have a knack for it. And I just kind of honed right in on that and haven't really stopped ever since.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many pens you've helped me purchase. And I'm sure so many people are like, yes, yeah, me too.
Oh,
because it could be overwhelming and a little intimidating to say, okay, I'm going to start using a fountain pen. There's just so much.
Yeah, exactly. And what, I can help with that, but there's just a natural barrier to entry. It's like, I always talk about fountain pens as being a true writing instrument, so just like if you were trying to learn, and I've got a musical background, just like if I was to pick up any instrument and try to learn it, I can make noise with it, but to be able to like play it well and really enjoy the process, it takes practice, and you have to learn and you have to use it for a little while. But when you do, oh man, the payoff is so great. So, fountain pens, they used to be much more of a utilitarian thing back in the early to mid 1900s. It was kind of like the smartphone of the day. That was the way that people communicated with each other, was with a fountain pen, and then ballpoint pens came out, and then you had computers and all kinds of other things that came up. So now obviously there's video calls, there's just way more, practical ways to communicate from a, personal or business standpoint. But it's the same kind of thing. Like you can listen to music on, your phone or on the radio or whatever, but to play an instrument, it's a whole different experience. So that's kind of how I equate it, is if you're using a fountain pen, it's like you're using an instrument, and the time you put in, will contribute to the amount of enjoyment that you get out of it. But it's not going to be for everybody, because it takes, it takes a little bit of work to learn how to use it. But I try to make it as easy as possible for people who are interested and willing to, take those kind of initial steps and overcome that little bit of a barrier there, and try and get people to the enjoyable parts as quickly as possible. And
you make the information so digestible and approachable.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. It's taken a bit of work, and that was through the school of hard knocks, because I was in the same boat as anybody else who, grew up. I didn't use a fountain pen until I was 25 years old. So I came into it and I was like,
I thought you grew up with fountain pens. I thought that
not at all.
Your family was like a fountain pen connoisseur. I don't.
No, I wish that probably would have made things a lot easier for me. But
So that's
no,
even more amazing that you were
well,
able to pick up on this so quickly.
what's interesting about that is like I knew people who grew up with fountain pens and they certainly enjoy them, but I don't know, you kind of, just like anything else that you grow up with, you don't necessarily know what it's like to be on the other side of that. So I grew up without them and I was looking for a better writing experience, not knowing that fountain pens really existed or not having a kind of personal introduction to them. But then once I discovered them, it was like walking through like the wardrobe into Narnia. I was like,
oh
whoa,
my God, yeah.
like, what is this?
Good analogy.
What is this world? And so I think that's why, I kind of represent that experience, that enthusiasm, for anybody who discovers these things for the first time, is they're just like, wow, I had no idea that such a great and personalized writing experience was out there and that this was the way to do it. So that's kind of I view my way as like, I'm kind of guiding people into the wardrobe and then they come into Narnia and it's like this magical world for them. If they're wanting to go into Narnia, the Fountain Pen Narnia. Right.
Yeah. That's so cool. I love that. Yeah. I like I said, you've helped me choose so many pens, from like the simple Twisby to my first Pelican M400. Oh my God.
Nice.
I was so excited when that pen arrived from your shop.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's great. That's great. I'm so glad.
I've had to like make sure I don't go too crazy.
Always.
And just like tread carefully because there's just so many cool pens.
I agree. And it's interesting because you would think, fountain pens have been around for about 150 years. So it's not exactly like hot new technology. But what's really fascinating about fountain pens as a whole is that they've gone through so many they've been global. The manufacturers that are making fountain pens, Japan, Germany, Italy, France, US, UK, India, China, literally the whole world. It's all over the place because everybody's writing stuff down. So it's really fascinating to see just the history of it and how that's influenced different parts of it. There's a lot of depth there for people that are really into history and how the culture influences different types of pens and different manufacturers. But also just the fact that they used to be such a utilitarian tool. And then they went through such a major disruption with really the ballpoint pen in the 50s and 60s, right. Really just like upended a lot of pen companies. And there's a lot that aren't around anymore, but the ones that have kind of still carried through, now they're catering to really an enthusiast, community of people that are still into pens. So the types of products that are coming out now are just far more interesting. And, there's a lot of engagement and enthusiasm in the community for these products. And the manufacturers recognize that. So they're responding to people that get excited about pens. And it's just, to me, it's a really fascinating industry to be in. And, even doing this now for about 13 years, it's still, I'm self-employed founder, all that kind of stuff. So I've spent more than a full-time job's worth of time dealing with fountain pens. But after 13 years of more than full-time, so more than any reasonable person in their entire lifetime would spend with fountain pens, I'm still learning new things every day. I still get excited about new stuff that comes out. I'm still excited to talk to new people and, talk about pens every chance I get. So I guess I can sort of say at this point, pretty much anybody that gets into fountain pens that really enjoys it, you have an entire lifetime ahead of you of enjoyment if that's your thing.
Right. And it's interesting that you brought up, the digital age that we're in, right? Because you would think that, a company that's centered around the analog system wouldn't be able to thrive as well. Just because now, right? Who has a pen and paper anymore? Exactly.
Right. Who also listens to vinyl records or,
exactly.
It's like, I think actually it's fascinating because there's a lot that the digital age and the rise of social media and whatever buzzwords we want to put around it, that has disrupted things for sure. But at the same time, I think there's, any community-based industry that has a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of passion, collective nature, the collectibles, these types of things. I think that social media has actually helped that a lot Because my observation when I first got into the fountain pen world, again, not having any background in it, it was all a process of discovery for me. So around the 2009, 2010 timeframe, when I was really exploring the fountain pen world, there were a lot of folks in the industry who were really thinking that it was on the decline and that it was going to be a few years and they were going to pretty much be out of business. So I just didn't see it that way because, again, I didn't have any background in it. So maybe it was naivete. Maybe I was just seeing things differently. And, growing up with some social media, I was in college when Facebook was created for college students.
Oh, me too.
So I saw some of that. Yeah. So it's like you and I, like we're in a unique place. Like our millennial little band, probably like a 5-year band. Yeah. We have a very unique perspective because we grew up younger without the internet and maybe some of it starting to influence. And then by the time we were, going into college, entering the workforce, the internet was starting to take over. So we were seeing kind of the both sides of it. And it was like, to me, it was so obvious. It was like, oh, of course, like fountain pens are really cool. They've been around a long time. There's definitely passion, enthusiasm for them. And it's a legit, just rewarding hobby. So anything like that is going to stick around. People are going to find a way to be into it. There's all kinds of obscure passions and hobbies and interests out there. And, basically what the internet did is allowed everybody who has these obscure interests to find each other and share with each other. So I was not bearish on the fountain pen industry at any point, because as soon as I discovered it, I was like, oh my gosh, there's such an opportunity here for, especially something so established, for people then to share their decades of experience in the industry. In general, like some of the pen brands we have are 100+ years old, multi-generational family businesses and deep rooted culture around these companies. I'm like, there's so much just richness here. It just needs to be shared with people. And the internet has allowed that to happen. And so actually we've seen, I don't have like industry data as a whole to say how much fountain pens have grown or whatever, but certainly the excitement, enthusiasm in our company, Goulet Pens, has grown obviously a lot since we were founded, because we were not in existence before that. But we've been able to grow as part of that because I think the ability for people to find each other who are enthusiastic about it, share with each other, learn from each other, having platforms like podcasts and YouTube videos and Instagram, TikTok, all these things has allowed us to be able to share for other people interested to be able to find it. Whereas previously it would have been much more difficult.
Right. That makes so much sense. Do you think that the social media or internet saturation also helps? Like when people say, you know what, I need a break. I need to step away from my phone or my laptop or whatever.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, me personally, I use technology a lot, even in running an analog product business. I mean, I'm producing content digitally. I'm living on social media platforms, even just operating internally with our company. We have 27 people, so we have to use Slack and Gmail and all the things, right? And so I'm using a lot of software all the time. So for me, actually, it's very special and very rewarding when I get to use something tactile. And just, me personally, I love tactile things. Again, I started out in woodworking. I love doing yard work at my house and building things with my kids. Like, I just love working with my hands. And there is something different for me to be able to write something down using my actual fingers and just feeling the feedback of the pen on the paper and stuff like that. Like, to me, it's a different experience. So I don't do it all the time for everything because that's just not necessarily practical. But, certainly I do it just because it's rewarding personally, but then also, when I'm trying to reflect more deeply, or when I'm trying to have a one-on-one meeting with somebody, like saying I'm like interviewing somebody to work at our company, I'm not going to just pull up a computer and ask them questions with a screen in between us. I'm going to shut that. I'm going to have pen and paper, and it's going to be different. Or if I'm trying to really think deeply about something, I'm going to write that down with a pen and paper because it kind of tunes me into a different wavelength in my brain when I do that. So I think there's a good place for that. Yeah, definitely.
I agree. There's something happens when we use pen and paper that definitely clicks better.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a lot of studies and stuff that show, that kind of thing. And I know back from, when I was in my more musical days, when I was younger, that when you're playing a physical instrument, you're using something like 90% of the cognitive, whatever capacity of your brain, because, you're having to, I played like woodwind instruments, stuff, clarinet, bass clarinet, that kind of thing. So when you're having to control your breath, you're having to read the music, listen to what's going on around you, you're playing with your fingers, there's all kinds of stuff you're having to think about. It takes such intense focus that you're really using a lot of your brain. So I'm a big proponent of music, but also I think you're getting a lot of that too when you're writing things down, especially with something like a fountain pen, where it's, you're able to write a little faster, especially if you're writing, longhand or in cursive or something, you can write a little faster. And the beautiful thing about fountain pens is they glide smoother, they write nicer. So your hand doesn't cramp as much. You don't have to like push down on the paper like you do with the ballpoint. So me personally, it's less taxing on my physical like hand and stuff like that. So I'm able to write a little more fluidly, and I'm able to kind of get in more a state of flow, right? So while I'm writing things down, I can be thinking about things, and I can't write so fast. I can't type it out to where it's just like this stream of conscious kind of, nonsense, which can be good sometimes too. But, I have to process it a little bit differently. And to me, it's kind of like you're turning a dial in your brain, in terms of, how much you're having to summarize your thoughts and process it when you get it down. You do that at different speeds when you're typing versus when you're talking versus when you're writing something down. So for me, just as I've used fountain pens and gotten to know them over the last decade plus, I found that in certain areas that I'm trying to organize my thoughts or trying to write things down or make my thoughts more concise, the fountain pens have been a really good way for me to kind of tune into a specific kind of brain, wavelength or something like that. So I find that not only do I enjoy that, but I hear that as feedback regularly from people who are using fountain pens all the time. Yeah. Not only just for like, brainstorming and these types of things, but also for therapy, like for journaling and personal productivity, bullet journaling, stuff like that. But, a lot of people who have anxiety and depression and things like that, journaling really, I hear that as such an overwhelming theme in the last, 3 to 5 years, especially as we've had a lot going on in the world. I hear that all the time from people using pens, is that they really attribute that to their mental health.
Well, it's so interesting that you said that, because that's exactly how I found you guys. So I was a teacher for a long time, and I decided to, we opened up Miami Lit. I decided to be a stay-at-home mom for a little bit. I just put everything on hold. Yeah. And which is when I listened to more of your story, you and your wife, I related so much, because my husband was at work doing all these things, and I was at home with this company just sitting there. Yeah. And it started to create all these feelings of anxiety. So my husband gifted me a notebook, and he said, "Why don't you think about using a fountain pen?" And I was like, "I don't even know where to start. What do I do?" And here you guys come to the rescue with your educational videos. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. And I started doing something I hadn't done in years, which was journaling. And it helped so much. I can't even tell you how much it helped.
That's incredible. I'm so glad to hear that. There's something there, like I'm kind of exploring, just like this is a little more of a personal note, but there's something there. I've had, my wife and I, we work together, we run our own business, we have 2 kids. It's been stressful. Like, let's be real. Starting your own business is really stressful, especially with young kids. Oh my gosh. So, that has been something that we've been really just personally dealing with is anxiety and these types of things. Mental health has been a very, very strong theme in our own lives, really, as we got into our 30s. And so we are very familiar with that feeling. And I don't know, there's some like studies and stuff like that, but I don't know. For me, it's more of just like practical thing and just talking to other people who use pens. There's definitely something there where, it's such a helpful tool, and it's not like the end all be all. There's lots of different ways to go about mental health, self-care and these types of things. But for sure, journaling is something I hear so much from people. So I don't know. I'm kind of exploring that right now, just because that wasn't originally why I got into fountain pens.
Right.
But at the same time, I didn't originally know I was going to get into fountain pens. So I've kind of an exploratory nature. So I'm like, you know what, there's a common theme here. I wonder, what there is around this. Maybe I can explore this. Maybe I can, talk to some psychologists and stuff like that and see maybe what's the deeper meaning behind, some of all this. And so I don't know, I'm still kind of exploring that in my own mind.
That would be interesting to hear what an expert has to say. I mean, I know from an educator's perspective, there's nothing like facing yourself on paper. You know what I mean? It's really hard to manipulate your thoughts and to lie to yourself once you've put certain words on paper. Yeah. So for me, that was a big one, to be able to just lay it all out and be able to face it and accept it or change it or do whatever I needed to do with it. And the whole pen paper experience was like an added treat, right? Like, okay, I have to do this. Sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's painful, but I'm going to use an awesome pen. I'm going to have fun with it,
That's awesome.
Like you said, that flow of very little interruption, that getting into that meditative zone of just letting your hand go. Oh, it's really, really special. Yeah.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I think that's part of the challenge. Like we all, just facing a blank notebook, and especially when you're, trying to write down like your own thoughts or whatever. I mean, I kind of face that myself, even if I have a new notebook or just a blank sheet of paper. I'm like, here, I have to write down some idea or write down what I'm feeling or whatever. It can be intimidating. I think that, it's just like if you're trying to exercise more or, you want to start yoga, but it's intimidating. You don't know what to do. Having the tools that you're using be something you can get excited about. Can be enough to kind of get you over that hump of just the intimidation of staring at a blank piece of paper. If you have a new pen, you're like, oh, I got a new ink. Let me try this one out. That can be enough to motivate you to just like start writing something. And then once you start, then it starts flowing and you just, you don't have that same kind of barrier to overcome. So I don't know, me personally, not saying that everybody needs to be like buying stuff all the time. I mean, obviously that's full disclosure, that's my business. So, I sell pen products. So sure, that's great. But I mean, really just, I like people that are using their stuff, they're using their pens. And I find that, the vast majority of people that we sell fountain pens to are ones who are literally using them, writing with them, that kind of stuff. They're not just like collecting them to invest or, like that.
I think that's one of the things that sets you guys apart through sharing your content and through just your whole business. It feels like everything's very intentional. It's not just, here's the latest pen, get it. You know what I mean? Yeah. It seems like there's a bigger purpose behind it. And I think a lot of people can appreciate that.
Yeah.
When we're constantly bombarded with like, buy this, buy that.
Absolutely. And I get that. I mean, it is something that I have to be cognizant of, just because, yes, that is our business, and we've got quite a few people whose families and mortgages and all that stuff are paid for what we sell, and we put out content for free. So it is a little bit of a leap of faith, especially doing it this long, to say, okay, it's going to be worthwhile to put all this out there, knowing that, I just hope through sheer force of goodwill that, enough people will come and support our store to allow us to continue basically self-funding, because we don't get paid to do any of our marketing. We're all self-funded. So it really is just like the generosity of the community and people feeling, I ascribe to the whole idea of, if you add enough value to people, then they will want to buy from you and they will want to support you. And I think that just, look at things like Patreon and all the people who are able to fund their own like passion projects, whether it's music or podcasts or video making or whatever. I think that has played out at even bigger level, because that just underlying principle of, if you're adding enough value to people, then they will come back and reward you for that. And so that's essentially how we've done it ever since we started this company, and how we still continue to do it. And we do some small, like traditional digital advertising with like Google search and, some of that kind of stuff. More just like if somebody's searching for a specific product, I want my website to pop up in their feed, but I'm not trying to hard sell anybody on it, because let's be real, fountain pens are, you got to kind of know what you're getting into. So I don't want to oversell it to anybody, because it takes a little bit to get into it.
The whole world.
Yeah. But I mean,
but an exciting one.
It is. Yeah. So I'm more of the mentality of like, let me entertain, educate, just tons and tons of education. And then really just try to show the enthusiasm of myself, my team, and the community and as a whole, because I think that's very appealing as a kind of a whole package. And then, when you can find really cool products that then can motivate you and you can actually use them as tools for things like your own journaling, mental health, whatever productivity tools, whatever derives that value for whoever's looking at pens. There's so many different ways that can benefit people's lives. Then I think that just sharing that and then letting people make the decision for themselves, if they're interested enough, cool, then they'll come and buy. But I'm not trying to and again, this is probably just me not being a great commission sales guy. Like maybe I could sell more if I was like trying to do more of a hard sell, but that's, in the short term at least. But I don't know, for me personally, I'd rather just be just very authentic to who I am and just share with people and, let them try to see the potential benefit for themselves and then let them explore, just give them all the tools to explore and learn about it as they are able. And then if they find it appealing, they'll join in and then, walk through that wardrobe again, going with the Narnia metaphor. And then, they'll see like, wow, this is a really kind of like a hidden gem out there on the internet is the pen world.
Yeah. No, I was so excited when I learned about you guys because not only are you this amazing pen company, but then you're in the United States, so we can support, an American company, and it's the whole package.
Thank you.
And everything that you're doing, I think people respond to so well because they can see that it's so transparent.
Yeah.
And you brought up a couple of minutes ago, opening up the business with your spouse, your wife. Yeah. How was that experience? Because I also work with my husband here at Miami Lit. And I wouldn't change it for the world, but it is interesting.
Yeah, it's not for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Probably the thing I hear the most when I tell people like, oh yeah, my wife and I work together. They're like, I could never work with my spouse every day. It's the thing I hear the most. But so my wife and I, Rachel, we've been together for 20 years now. We met when we were 17. So we were pretty young when we met.
Okay, that's crazy. My husband and I met when we were 17. Did you guys go to high school together?
No, we went to high school in different parts of the state and we met at a like singing competition thing. Like it was like a state level singing competition.
Oh, that's
and we
so
met
cool.
and just, we like hit it off and traded emails and, just kind of went from there. So
that's amazing.
It was interesting. But so we've kind of like almost grown up together in our adult lives. Which you can appreciate. So, for us, we were long distance for almost 5 years before we basically got married. We ended up going to college together for a couple of years, but, we weren't really together every day and basically until we got married. So, I don't know, some of that was just like the longing to be together all the time. And then basically once we were able to start this company together, it was like, awesome. We just get to do everything together. So we're just one of those couples that like, you might get sick of because we do so much together, but even still, we don't really get sick of each other. So, it's not for everybody, but for us, it works out great. And, definitely it's got its challenges because sometimes I just want to I want a sympathetic ear, but I can't really, just kind of like dump my stuff out there on her because she's also affected by everything.
Yeah.
In my work life.
You can't talk to her about your boss,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, that has its challenges for sure. But at the same time, we also get to share in all of each other's wins and we are very aligned in our goals, personal life and business life, which is very blended anyway. So, to me, the benefits far outweigh the drawbacks.
For sure.
But you got to be like super aligned and you got to spend time together working on communication, all that kind of stuff. Same thing you do in just any relationship. If you're in just a business relationship, any business partnership, it's like a business marriage. So you got to be aligned. You got to have shared goals. You got to communicate with each other anyway.
Yeah.
So to me,
that's
it's like,
perfectly said. I never thought of it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Legally and everything, it's almost like, it's almost as binding. So it's like, if you start a business together, you're almost marrying that person anyway. Mm-hmm. So to me, it just seems efficient and ideal to be in a partnership with my partner. So,
Right.
I mean, to me, it works out great and we still work together, but it definitely has its challenges because we have different strengths and, sometimes we're a lot better about it now, but especially in the early days with the young kids and everything, we would have, little marital, whatever spats, not yelling or anything like that, but we have, we would get tired and we'd have our intense moments and it would be like out
you're
there
human,
in the office in front of everybody. And we'd have to come back and be like, sorry, everybody, that was like a marriage moment there. So we've gotten a lot better about that just in terms of how we communicate to each other, and just our team knows that this is sort of the dynamic too. It's definitely different, it's for them too, to have both co-founders who are married together running the business, like that's a dynamic that a lot of companies don't necessarily have. But, to me, it's
how
great.
do you balance, personal life and business life? Do you guys have some sort of system or?
Not like a formal system. Mostly we don't have much of a personal life. It is, it's like the whole phraseology of like a work-life balance to me. I don't know. I don't necessarily ascribe to that as what it looks like. It's really work-life integration, especially because with COVID too, that just really blended everything back. Because it was like when we started things back in 2009, 2010, when we were first getting it off the ground, I mean, we were at home, we were working, sitting on our laptops on the couch next to each other, working together like that. And then, we outgrew our house and then we got an office and all that kind of stuff. And then when COVID hit and we had to go fully remote, we basically went back to working on the couch next to each other again. And I was like, well, this is kind of weird. It feels like we time traveled a little bit, but the business is so, different and bigger than it was back then. So I don't know, to me, it was kind of interesting to go through that, but I don't know. I forgot what your original question was.
No, it was like, if you guys have some sort of system where you can differentiate, right, between like your work life and your personal life. But I feel like that's so difficult to do when it's your business. Right.
It's kind of different for everybody, I guess. I mean, a lot of it is you have to kind of find what works for you. I think, we have one thing that really helped us a lot as we, especially, it's not necessarily like the revenue and like how big your business is. It's definitely a lot has to do with how many people you have in your business. So, I mean, if it's just the two of you and you have a lot of like external people and contractors and stuff, and it's really the two of you doing a lot of the technical work, that becomes very easy because it's pretty practical what you need to do. It's when you get management and leadership and that type of stuff, and you have different teams in your company, things get more complex and you're not necessarily doing the hands-on work every single day. That's when it gets more complicated and communication becomes really important, and having clearly defined roles, clearly defined kind of boundaries for not just yourselves, but for everybody on the team. That becomes really important. So your kind of organizational structure really becomes important. And that was something I wasn't quite, I knew like on some level that needed to happen, but I didn't quite know what that looked like and how to set that up in the beginning. Because again, we were 25 when we started this thing. So it was, we didn't know a lot. And there's a lot just technically that we had to learn, even just shipping and HR and taxes and all this stuff. There's so much technical stuff we had to learn to get the thing off the ground, that then once we were so busy, we needed to hire people. It was like, oh, we need people to do the work, but now, there are other people. At first it was in our house with our kids, and it's like, okay, how does this work? And then having to come up with having meetings and, defining our values and mission and purpose and stuff like that. It was like, oh, I don't know. We just kind of started this thing, and it was just the two of us. It was like, we're aligned, we're good. But then having other people join in, they needed to know like, well, what's the direction of the company? What are the goals for 1 year, 3 year, whatever? And it's like, oh, shoot. Yeah, I should probably figure that out a little bit, so it's like we needed to put more structure in place as we had more people in and that kind of stuff. So we focused a lot on company culture and organizational structure and stuff like that. That has really helped a lot. And I think that has helped us not only from a business standpoint, just because there's a lot more clarity around what everybody needs to do and what winning looks like for every role, but also just in our personal lives, we know, okay, she's got this, I've got this. our other leaders, they've got these other parts and we come together. I mean, literally my wife and I have meetings scheduled together, and sometimes she's in it, sometimes I'm in it, sometimes we're both in it, depending on what it is. But we each have defined roles within the company. And, I have things that I completely just let her make the decision on. I might weigh in, but she's the final decision maker, on like certainly like new products and stuff that we carry. You would think like me being in the videos on the pen guide that I would have the final say, but no, I've actually given her, all the authority to make those decisions, as is everybody else on the team, because we don't want a design by committee kind of a thing. Like we need one final decision maker on these products. So we'll all weigh in and everybody gets to have their decision, input and all that kind of stuff, but she makes the final call, but then there's other things related to, leadership and various things where it's the opposite. I make the final call because I'm accountable to whatever the result is. So we had to go through a process of defining all that stuff. And there's no like 5 life hacks that I can say to make that easy. It's just a process of trial and error that you have to go through. I've read a ton of books and tried to figure that out, and ended up coming up with, a kind of a blended approach over the years that we put in based off various things I've read, various things that we've tried that have more or less worked out well. But it's, it's any other relational thing. It's kind of a living organism, and you have to constantly be testing and getting feedback and trying new things
and adjusting. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's what has been the most memorable experience or accomplishment that you've had so far through Goulet Pens?
Wow, there's so many. Kind of it's funny because like anything hard, it's sort of like if you have children, some of the things you'll remember the most will be like the early times that you have when your kids were really young, because it was so new and so hard, and your highs were really high and your lows were really low.
Yeah.
And you don't know what's going on. It's a whole new world. So, I mean, for us, I think the biggest, most rewarding thing for us was literally when we first had what I would consider to be like a sustainable business, because we tried for years. I did the whole pen making thing. I never was able to make that profitable. But once we reached the point where the business, we could both pay ourselves, we were paying ourselves a paycheck from the business. And it took us, literally years to get to that point. And once we did that, it was just like, wow, we've like made it. Like, this is the dream. It was the two of us working together, having our own business. Like, and that was pretty early on. It was like 2011 that happened. So, I mean, ever since then, it's just been like, cool. All right, well, let's just see what other fun things that we can do.
What do you think carried you through that you guys never threw in the towel and were like, you know what, this is too much. I can't. Time to call it quits.
I mean, we've definitely called it quits on plenty of things. Not the whole thing, right? I don't know. I think it's for us, it's been kind of an internal drive. Like, it's not any one, quote that I look at in the mirror that carries me through, or any, it's, I think when you are motivated to do your own thing, sometimes it's by circumstance, sometimes you just are just born with it, whatever. I think anybody has the potential to start and run their own business, but to keep it going and really do it and really feel rewarded for the long term doing it. There's a lot of things that have to happen right in order to make that happen. But I just think ultimately you have to really just want to do it. And I can't really say how to make that happen. For me, it was kind of in my nature. Like, my wife, she carried us through in those early years. She was working the corporate job and I was kind of trying to make the business happen, and working various other kind of side jobs, bringing in whatever money I could. But I didn't have a very strong resume, so to speak, having a failed pen making business, and I did power washing, and I considered becoming an electrician and a police officer. I was kind of all over the place in my early years, but then we kind of hit on the pen thing. So I don't know, for me, it was just, I knew that that's what I wanted to do from a very kind of early on. I just didn't know what it was going to look like. So I had to try a whole bunch of different things. So got very used to failing at things and giving up on various, dreams, I guess you could say. But the ultimate goal of like, I want to start my own thing, that was kind of always there. Even, it was really like in college that I kind of stumbled on that. I had like part-time jobs in college. I worked as like a stock boy at a grocery store and stuff like that. And, my boss was trying to schedule me over times when I had like summer school classes and all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, this is so frustrating. I'm just trying to work. And it's like, it shouldn't be this difficult, and I was getting paid like $7.50 an hour or something. And I was like, there's got to be a better way than this. And I don't know, it was kind of just in me. So I was really just looking for a way to make that happen. And I found the pen thing. And as soon as I discovered something that actually started to click and started to work, it was like, oh, well, this is pretty darn motivating. And the motivation came, it's like, I forget who made the expression. Maybe it was Teddy Roosevelt or somebody like that, but it was, there's nothing more motivating than progress. So
for sure.
You're working towards something and you see that there's traction. Oh, that's
all you really need.
That's all you need. Yeah. If you can see whether it's a relationship or a business or whatever, idea or venture that you have, if you can see that there's progress happening, that is so motivating. So I would just say, just keep trying. If anybody out there is trying to find some way to get motivated, just try stuff and go press harder into the things where you're gaining some traction.
Exactly. That's perfectly said. So to go back to the pens a little bit, what's the most common questions your customers ask you?
Most common questions. Oh, it depends. If somebody's not into fountain pens at all, some of the questions I get are, some basic ones like how do I use a fountain pen, or how do I pick a fountain pen? Some very basic stuff. And a lot of it you can just go on YouTube and look at our YouTube channel and see, like, I pretty much made videos on all the most basic questions.
I think you could make like a whole course. If you were to put all your videos together.
Well, we have a series called Fountain Pen 101 that's kind of like that. It's like a summary of all the basic information for getting into fountain pens. It's like 20 some videos. It's 3.5 hours long at this point, but there's a lot of good information to kind of get you going. But most of the time, if people are curious about fountain pens at all, it's not just one question. They start to pepper me with like a bunch of different questions and they just want to like get into it. But usually if somebody kind of hears, oh, fountain pens, they still make those. I hear that a lot. Or
you're like, you have no idea.
I'm like, yeah, they do. Or they're like, is that the thing with the feather on it? I'm like, that's a quill. That's like 50 years before fountain pens were made. That was prior to fountain pens, but you're in the general track. Or people are just immediately like, oh, my handwriting's terrible. I could never use a fountain pen. I'm like, actually, it's not true.
That's probably why you should use a fountain pen.
Exactly. But like
it helps.
Yeah, I can tell by gauging with somebody, especially if it's like if it's online, it's whatever, because you only get so much context. But if I'm face to face with somebody, I can tell immediately if they're like, fountain pen's interesting. My grandfather had one and I used to use it, and then you can like start a whole conversation. But if they're like, oh yeah, my handwriting's terrible and I can never use it, then you're like, oh, okay, well, you're like putting up a barrier in this conversation about why you're not going to go in further. And so I was kind of like, oh yeah, that's okay. Everybody feels that way. And then we'll just roll into something else. I don't even bother like trying to sell somebody on the idea of fountain pens if they're not going to be into it, because it's like, they got to be excited about it to really get the benefit from it.
Is there a fountain pen that would be like the best everyday pen?
Ooh, it's going to vary, right? Like
question.
It's like saying like, what's the best food? Like, what's the best breakfast? What's the best wine? There's so many different things that make, that's the blessing and the curse with fountain pens is you can personalize it and you can get like such a great experience for you that maybe won't be, the preference for everybody else. Cause you can get, different stroke widths, right? Depending on the tip of the nib on the pen. So you can, if you like to write really small and really fine, you can get pens that will do that. Or you can get ones that are really wet and broad and put a lot of ink down. You can choose your own ink choice. You can get smoother ones or rougher ones, or there's so many ways you can personalize it that there is no like one best, it's just the best for you. So there's definitely some good pens that are great to start with. We have some fountain pens for newbies videos that list them off. You mentioned TWSBI. TWSBI is a great brand. They're pretty affordable. most of their pens are sub $50, and, you get to see the ink inside. It's very cool. And they're very reliable. So those are great ones. The Lamy Safari is a good one. Pilot Metropolitan. These are all some pretty classic kind of starter fountain pens that are great, pretty affordable. But I mean, any of these pens will last you basically your whole lifetime. Like
right.
Even though they, if you're used to buying disposable big pens and stuff like that, there's nothing wrong with them, but they just serve a different purpose. So most people, when they get into fountain pens, they're like, oh my gosh, $20, $50 for a pen. That seems like so much. And it's like, yeah, but you're going to use that pen for years. Right. Like it's different. You're buying something to last, and you're going to get to know it, and you're going to appreciate it. And that's going to be like the pen that you want to use all the time, as opposed to just picking up whatever is lying around and you don't really think about it. You then, once you start using, especially the same pen over and over again, you get to know it better, and it becomes kind of like part of you. So I don't know. It's a little bit different for everybody, but most people in those, and we have stuff on our website too that, has filters for, good starter pens and all that kind of stuff. That's honestly the best place to start, because we've got so much experience helping guide people in those questions. And there's just pens that people have bought for a long time. A lot of people have bought starter pens and given us feedback about which ones are good. And so not only do we have our own preferences, but we have ones that we know that people who are new to fountain pens have bought and then really enjoyed as well. So,
do you have a favorite pen for you personally?
Oh man, I have so many favorite pens. This is the problem, is like being a dealer hooked on your own product is like, I have a lot of pens, and I love a lot of them for a lot of different reasons. Yeah, I mean, fountain pens are interesting because they can range in price. I mean, literally you can buy a pen for $3. You can buy a pen for $15,000. I mean, they can really get up there in price when you get into like the handmade artwork and collectible kind of nature of them with, exotic materials and stuff. They become, more like functional art than anything at that point. But that by all means, you don't have to spend that much to really enjoy fountain pens. I think most people end up pens in like the $50 to $150 range is like the really, really good pens. But I mean, a go-to one for me is a pen called the Lamy 2000. It's such a classic looking workhorse pen. I think I even have it in my pocket right now, actually.
I think I have it here too.
Yeah, it's a German made pen. It's by Lamy in Germany. I got to tour their factory, which was amazing.
Do I have it? Oh, you did?
Yeah.
See,
yeah.
I have it too.
Look at that. There you go. See? Like I have,
awesome.
I have this pen in almost every nib size that's available. Like I use it so much. It's so reliable. It looks nice. This pen was actually designed in 1966, but it still looks good, and it still looks almost kind of futuristic.
Yeah.
So like the styling
was that old.
Yeah, it's over 50 years old. Isn't that crazy? And it's
amazing.
It's hardly changed. It's very, very durable. So it's made of polycarbonate. So it's very sturdy, very durable. It's got a gold nib. The nibs write really well. It's got an internal piston, so it's got a pretty decent ink capacity. It's a snap cap, so it's very convenient, easy to use. It's not too heavy. It's not too light. It's very well balanced. It's just an all around really, really good pen. So this is one of our most popular ones. I love it. You can get in any color you want as long as it's black.
Right.
They have like a stainless steel version of it and stuff like that. But this is the one that I go to. And this one's like $160-ish. So it's not like maybe, I mean, if you buy it as your first fountain pen, you're probably going to enjoy it pretty well, but usually it's like more of a next level pen for folks. But I've been using pens for quite a while. So, I mean, this is one that I keep on coming back to over and over again. Even though I have some, much more expensive and kind of fancier pens, those are my more special ones that I'll kind of like set aside and appreciate more for like the art and stuff like that. But as like my daily carry one, this is one of the best.
Yeah. I really enjoy that one too. This one, and where is it? Oh, and this one, the Vanishing Point.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Those
Classic.
Two, I really, really, really like.
That one's cool. That's a click retractable one, which is not the easiest thing to do with fountain pens. So for anybody listening who's not familiar with fountain pens, fountain pens, you have to fill it with a bottle of ink. So you have liquid ink and you fill the pen with the ink. So you don't use like cartridge refills or anything like you would with a rollerball pen. So you have to like clean them out a little bit and stuff like that. But the pen is liquid. It's going to flow smoother. But the challenge with that, with something like a click retractable pen, is you have to have all the technology inside to be able to house this liquid ink without it leaking everywhere. in this like retractable mechanism. So there's
genius.
not a lot. There's not a lot of companies that have done that, but Pilot, they're the best. They have the best click retractable pen in the world.
And then this one I'm going to show you. This has turned into like my pen show and tell. This one I've had a really hard time bonding with. So this is the Sailor.
Okay.
I don't even know what.
That looks like a Pro Gear.
Yeah, and it needs to be cleaned. Sorry about that. It's the Pro Gear. I think this is like the Four Seasons.
Okay, yeah.
The medium fine nib.
Yeah.
I wanted.
So what's troublesome about
really
that
scratchy. Pen? It's not
smooth,
this is like when I used my Lamy.
Yeah.
Just feels like butter, and this one. It's scratchy, so I don't know.
So it's interesting because like that's just kind of how they make them. So I mean that's part of the interesting thing about fountain pens too. Because I mean when you have a rollerball pen or a ballpoint pen, especially a ballpoint, I feel like a lot of people are familiar with those. They use a paste ink. So the ink, that's part of why they don't leak and you can leave them uncapped and all that. So there's a metal ball inside of those, and the ink behind it is very thick. And when you drag the ball, it rolls on the paper and it actually melts that paste. And that's what allows the ink to come out.
Oh.
So that's why you need friction and you need a little more pressure because you're creating that friction, you're melting that ink and it's coming out. So it can last a really long time, but it's more work to make it right, honestly. Now, obviously, you buy the higher quality ones you buy, it's going to be a little less work, but you're only going to get but so good because there's literally a process of friction there. So with fountain pens, it's all capillary action. So you have essentially water, it's water with other stuff in it, dye and some other things, but it's liquid water. So it flows just like water through your fountain pen. So you have capillary action that is allowing the water to flow through when it makes contact with the paper. So literally all you have to do is touch the pen to the page. And that capillary action is what causes the ink to flow. But there's still friction. You're still having a metal tip that's, gliding across the page, but it's not a ball that has to roll. It's literally just the tip of the nib. So you can actually smooth that. When I say you, I mean the manufacturers or, technically you can do it yourself, but it takes a little practice. You can actually smooth or roughen up that tip of any fountain pen, and you can get it to write with more friction or less friction, depending on how much you smooth that tip. So this is another dynamic to the whole fountain pen experience, but there are some people who like to have a little bit what's called a toothier fountain pen. So like your Sailor, that's kind of how Sailor does them. They're not made to be as glassy smooth as like a Pilot or a Lamy. Okay. They will make or Pelican. You mentioned Pelican as well. All of them, they make theirs a lot smoother.
I have that one
Sailor,
here too.
Sailor, there you go. So Sailor doesn't. They make theirs a little bit toothier, and some other manufacturers do that too, because some people like to have more of a feeling of like a graphite pencil. They like to have a little more grab.
That's exactly how it feels. Yeah. It feels like a pencil.
And so, I mean, it's not that it's necessarily wrong. It's just, that's how they do it.
That's how they did it. And here I am so ignorant. Like this pen doesn't work.
No, I mean, this is where I never run out of content, right? Is because there's so much nuance, especially as you get into different brands and all this, because it's sort of like, when you buy clothing, it's like there's sizes, but it depends on the cut. It depends on the manufacturer and all these different things. Right. So it's like, you sort of have to try it on and see how it fits to really know. You can't just, buy a size 10 and say like, I know how this is going to fit. It's like, no, I have to try it on basically. It's a good starting point to see maybe what might fit, but then you got to go in there. And then if you, I'll continue going with this, clothing analogy. So if you have something and it sort of fits, it's about the right size, but you just don't, it doesn't fit your body shape necessarily. Well, you can get it tailored and you can get it kind of fit so that it does fit right. That's sort of like what you can do with fountain pens. You can get a pen and you like, I sort of like this, but it's, like your Sailor, it's like, it's a little bit toothy. I'd rather have it just a bit smoother. Well, there are, so if you want to go to that like next level, there are professionals who can smooth that out and get it to write smoother. Yeah. So, I mean, it's an extra cost and stuff like that. But if you really love the pen, but you're like, I just want this to be a little bit smoother, you can either try smoothing it yourself, which is, little touchy maybe.
I'm not brave enough for that.
It's not something I recommend for like new people to get into because you are, you're regrinding metal. But there are people who do this professionally, and you can tell them, I really love my Lamy 2000. I want it to be as smooth as that. They'll know that pen, and they will be able to smooth it and get you kind of a better experience. So there's next level things as you get deeper and deeper into the hobby that you can, but that's the beauty of it, is like you can fine tune your experience that much. If you really love a certain pen, but you want it to write like something else, you can get it customized and tweaked and adjusted, to a degree to get it to be like that.
Right. That's good advice. I'm going to look into that because I'm not willing to give up on that pen. My husband's like, why don't you just pass it on? I'm like, no, I refuse. This pen is going to be my life. Darn it.
Yeah.
We will get along at some point.
Yeah. So other things you can do, we're really like nerding out on pens here, which I guess you have me on here. So that's kind of what you're asking for, but it's not just the pen, right? There's the paper and the ink as well. Mm-hmm. So there are certain inks that are more lubricated than others, and that might help things to write smoother. There's definitely a degree of roughness and smoothness when it comes to paper. So, this is all part of the experience. I call it like the Fountain Pen Trifecta. You have the pen itself, you have the ink and the paper. All three of them really work together to combine your whole writing experience. And depending on what you're going for, you can tweak and adjust any of the three of those to get you kind of a different feeling experience. And it's crazy because you don't realize just how sensitive your fingers are when it comes to touch, but it's really, really true. I mean, I'm telling you, just like the amount of friction that you're talking about on something like a fountain pen nib, the tip of that nib is so small. I mean, oftentimes it's less than a millimeter, which is really, really small. And you're dealing in microns of thickness on an abrasive that you would use to smooth the tip of that nib. And you can feel a difference on the page with microns
it's true.
of smoothness. Like, so that's part of why fountain pens do vary so much, is each manufacturer can kind of do things a little bit differently their way, and it'll feel different. But then if you're a nib working professional, you can fine tune it. And it's like a jeweler who is like smoothing, like it's a lot of the same tools and stuff like that as jewelers have. You have loops with like 20x magnification, and you're smooth, like differences you can't even see with the naked eye, but you can feel it with your hand. It's the blessing and the curse. It's like you can feel that difference, but at the same time, you can also really fine tune it and get that just like, oh, this is exactly
perfect.
What I want, Yeah. And
I think that's what we're all after, that perfect experience.
Exactly. So that's where the depth and the richness really comes from, is the more you use the pens, the more you can appreciate what makes them all different. I'm at the point now where it's like, when I first started, I was like, I want everything to be just like super, super smooth. And I really enjoyed that. And I hated pens that had some feedback to it. So I just kind of let them sit aside for a while. But as I used pens more and more, I was like, you know what? Sometimes I like to have that slightly different experience. I find that even my own journey, like I used to really like only really broad, really wet writing pens with bold ink colors and stuff like that. And it's like, no, actually, I can appreciate different pens for what they are. I might still gravitate towards certain ones that I prefer, but my palette, so to speak, has broadened quite a bit as I've used pens more. So I'm personally not as much a fan of people just like ditching pens they don't love quite as much, as long as they function as they're intended to. And that's why we have a whole customer service team here that's like, let's talk to you about it. Because sometimes, there's manufacturer defects and things like that maybe the pen actually is scratchy and there's something wrong with it. We'll help troubleshoot that. But a lot of times if something is just a little bit different, it's like, well, spend a little time with it, get to know it. Mm-hmm. Maybe you really don't like it, or it's like, a sailor, it's not a cheap investment. It's a couple $100 for that pen. So you're like, no, for a couple $100, I really want to, or you're like, for a couple $100, I shouldn't have to try to like this pen. We get that. Like, and we'll take it back and we'll find you something better. But, for me personally, I found a number of times, even a more expensive pen, it's not necessarily that the more you spend on a pen, the more you're going to love it. I mean, maybe, hopefully, but not necessarily, So I think sometimes there might be something different about that pen that maybe you just don't appreciate yet, or you just need to spend a little time with it and get to know it. But the beauty is, like, it's a pen. It's a durable good, so it's going to stick around for a while. It's not like a meal. It's not like if you have a meal and you're like, oh, didn't really like this meal as much as I thought it would. And now it's gone. It's like, no, this is a pen. I can set it aside for a month and try it again. And it's going to be the same pen. So, or you can adjust it or, so you have a lot of options. The pen's not going anywhere.
Yeah. And that's so true what you mean with your tastes changing and as you get more into this. Yeah. Because there were pens at the very beginning that I loved. And now I'm like, how did I like this? It's not good anymore,
Yeah. It's going to ebb and flow, and it's interesting because I'm in a different spot because I produce a lot of content and stuff like that. So I have many, many, many pens, way more than any reasonable person should. But a lot of them I have for kind of historical reference, and I'm pulling them out for different videos and stuff. And a lot of them are like they're exclusives that I've helped design with our manufacturers. So I just like keep them for posterity's sake. That's a different situation than what your average pen enthusiast might be in. But I mean, there's some people who are like, no, I only want 3 pens or 5 pens. And I have that in. Even if I get a new pen, I will do 1 in, 1 out. They want to maintain that. I'm not like that. I'm a hoarder. I will, any hobby, any interest that I get into, I get deep into it and I want a full breadth of experience, and there's plenty of that in the fountain pen world too. So, I mean, me personally, it's like, I will, even if I get a pen like a Lamy 2000, it's like, oh, I love this pen, but I have an extra fine on this one. I'd really love a broad or whatever, so I'll get another one in broad, so that's just me personally. And then I'll use it and it's like, oh, okay. I don't love this one quite as much. Let me set it aside, but at least now I know that. And I kind of build upon that experience there. But there's a lot of people in the fountain pen world who will like sell stuff, trade it with others. They'll use it for a time and then, maybe get something different, or they just kind of collect and then they end up with hundreds of pens over time. But, there's very few people who get a lot of pens that are like, wow, I really regret getting a lot of pens. Most of the time they're like, wow, I have a lot of pens. I didn't realize there was so many because I just really love pens.
Yeah.
They keep enjoying it. And the nice thing about pens is like, again, they don't really go bad. I guess you can wear them out over time to a degree, but they're pretty durable. So, and the more pens you get, the more you're spreading out the wear and tear on that even does happen over more pens. So they're just going to last that much longer. So me personally, I've always enjoyed, again, being a woodworker, I've always enjoyed tools and wood and things like that. This is all stuff that's, you buy a hammer and it's like probably the last hammer you're going to need for the rest of your life until you get like more specialized and get different types. It's kind of the same thing with pens. It's like you buy a fountain pen, it's going to be around for a while. So you have, even if your interest kind of changes or waxes and wanes over the years, you can pick it up again in a decade and enjoy it and fall back in love with it. In fact, and again, I'm talking a lot here, but clearly I'm passionate about this.
It's perfect.
There are so many people that I talk to that are like, I haven't used a fountain pen in 30 years. They're like, I used it in school or whatever. My family had it. I've had these things tucked away in a drawer. I found your videos and it's just like, I've fallen back in love with, there's so many people I found that did have,
amazing.
That haven't like always been in love with fountain pens, but they maybe were at some point, or they had more of a passive interest, but then they really fall in love with it and kind of build upon that with the enthusiasm that comes with, the content that's around pens now. And so that is a really pretty fascinating experience when I talk to people who, have a fall back in love with pens.
Yeah. Rediscovery.
Rediscovery. Yeah, I find that very rewarding too.
That's so cool. And you mentioned people using fountain pens when they were in school. So we know in a lot of countries that's a thing, right? Kids are required to use a fountain pen at school.
Yeah, a lot of countries. Yeah, Germany, to a degree, the UK, India, China, France, Italy. So a lot of them are still using them. A lot of places where pens are still manufactured is, very writing centric cultures. The kids are writing in school, though. That is all shifting, right? So a lot of that's in question as to how relevant that is in today's day and age. So a lot of what the US went through with that, decades ago, other countries are still kind of debating, how do they keep their writing culture relevant in today's world. That's a very active topic of conversation in many countries.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that that's something that parents here should kind of push for? And how would you introduce kids to fountain pens?
It's a good point. And it's it is something interesting because now, I mean, this was a thing a few years ago when Department of Education no longer required all the states to do cursive and to learn, longhand writing. Some states still do. I don't know exactly how many at this point, but it's something like 5 or 7, something. It's not all of them by far.
Yeah.
So it is up for debate because, and my kids are 10 and 12. And so I think about this, they use fountain pens, but they're not like dyed in the wool fountain pen users like some people might expect. Some of it's like the shoemaker's children have no shoes, if you've ever heard that expression.
Yes,
like,
definitely.
I talk about pens all day, and my kids are into, other things. They use fountain pens. I expose them to it, but I'm not going to like drill it into them because,
for sure.
I want, I don't want them to be forced to like it. I want them to have a natural interest, and they do. But I think, it is an interesting point of debate. How relevant is it in today's world? I think just exposing kids to it is really helpful. I always think it's cool when teachers, even professors in college, they have a lot to manage. There's a lot of curriculum out there. So I can understand why it's difficult to spend the time that would be needed to really teach handwriting. I think there's opportunity to just think about it differently than the way it's always been, because especially in the, earlier days, it was much more of just like a drill. It was like, you will learn handwriting, and there's a lot of people I know who are kind of scarred and like maybe didn't have great handwriting or were left-handed or whatever and weren't necessarily taught well, but it was still kind of like, there's like this guilt associated with not having great handwriting. Cause like handwriting was tied with morality for a long time in the US. Right. So it's like, you're not a moral person if your handwriting is bad. It's like, well, that's a bunch of bull crap, honestly.
Even your cognitive skills, like if your penmanship is not up to par, you must not be that smart.
Yeah. Like that's not really fair. Right. So I don't think we should go back to that. No. But at the same time, like, I think there's a way to expose kids to it now that's different and more healthy than doing it that way. I don't know exactly what that is. I'm not an educator. I'm not a, politician or anything like that. So I don't know necessarily what the answer is there, but I think that in the meantime, just, trying to teach kids about it as much as you can, just expose them to it. There are some resources, like we have a couple of products that we sell that are, books that like teach handwriting. One of them is called Cursive Logic, which is a pretty, low effort way of learning cursive that a teacher had actually developed for an autistic student that she had who wanted to learn how to write his own name in cursive.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So that's a pretty cool, and there's a cool backstory there with that product. There's another one that's a much more intensive one called the Art of Cursive Penmanship. It's written by a guy named Michael Sull, who is a master penman. So, there's only a handful of master penmen. He trained like the White House calligrapher and all this kind of stuff. So, he's fully legit. Yeah. Like, and he has a book called The Art of Cursive Penmanship that has much more of like the formal kind of cursive handwriting with a lot of information about posture and the history of handwriting and stuff like that. So that's more of a kind of a book for adults, who really want to kind of learn more about it. That's a great resource. But ultimately it just comes down to practice like anything else. And it's like, when it comes to handwriting, it's not like you're performing really for anybody. If you want to be a professional calligrapher and get paid to do it, okay, yeah, you should probably get some more formal education. But if you just want to improve your own handwriting, honestly, just practice and you're going to improve. And really what makes handwriting look good mostly is consistency. So if you practice more and your letters look similar, symmetry. If all of your E's look similar, it's going to look good, even if it's not the formal professional, script or font that can be associated to any one particular style. So honestly, even if the best thing I can tell people is like, if you don't really feel like practicing and you don't want to make it feel like a chore, just find something you enjoy writing, transcribe, poems that you love, or, quotes or expressions or whatever things you love to read. And you just want to have it as a sort of a meditative exercise, or just journal and just write and slow it down and just try to intentionally focus on the experience, kind of like a mindful writing.
Yeah.
And then just as you do it, your handwriting will improve just from practice and building up that muscle memory and stuff like that. So I think most people overthink it. I'm a little more of like, I'll just start doing it. And then if you really fall in love with it and then you want to improve, then you can get more into like the actual structured drills and stuff like that if you want to go for like really good consistency and stuff. But I don't think you have to go that far.
Yeah, you don't need to be like a master penman.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as like with kids, I don't really know what the answer is there, because I struggle with my own kids too, because my kids are learning coding. They're learning all kinds of stuff in school that like, oh, I didn't really have to learn that when I was their age. You know, and it's just like this. I mean, they're gonna grow up
now
and
it's so different too.
Oh, I can't help my kids with math at this point.
It's awful. Yeah, it's awful. So I can see where things like cursive and using a fountain pen would be beneficial. Yeah. But like you said, there has to be a different way to go about it. We can't go back to what we used to have, where it was just so demeaning.
Yeah, I don't think that's the right approach necessarily. The cool thing about fountain pens with kids is, really letting them be able to choose their ink color is pretty fun. So I think just like anything else, when a kid is able to kind of connect with whatever they're doing and able to kind of personalize it a little bit, they feel more connected to it and they're more likely to use it. So that would be the thing, is like, rather than focusing on a specific pen or a specific whatever thing, most kids have a favorite color. And if you go with colors that they like and find interesting, they're probably going to be more inclined to use it. And there's a lot of kids I know who get into fountain pens at fairly young ages, maybe not like the second, third grade age that has traditionally been associated with starting cursive writing, but even like late elementary or middle school, just having a pen that they like and is theirs, because they're starting to like self-identify and some of those types of things. Having something that they feel is theirs is going to greatly increase the chance of them actually wanting to use it. So letting them, have your own budget, but letting them pick which pen that they think is interesting and that they personally just find appealing. I think, curate their selection a little bit just to guide them. But letting them kind of pick it that's a pretty cool thing for a kid. So I think that's a good step, is just provide them with a tool that they personally like.
Yeah, for sure. Will we ever see a Goulet pen, fountain pen?
Possibly. Not like it used to be, not a handmade one that I'm doing, because it just takes way too much time and it's not worth it, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Like I personally can't hand make a pen that's of the quality that it would need to be to justify the expense that I would have to charge for my time. But, honestly, the what I've learned in being in the fountain pen industry for a while, fountain pens are actually quite complex. Like they're technological marvels. And to make them really well is actually pretty difficult. So the companies that make them really well, they've been doing it for a long time. They have a lot of very specialized equipment and specialized people that have been doing it for a long time. So in terms of me being able to actually manufacture it, I'm never going to be able to make a pen that's as good as, one coming from any of the manufacturers that we deal with. Now, at the same time, what we've been doing is co-branding. So we've been doing exclusives and coming out with pens that we help design and come up with. And so that we've been doing for years. So we have a lot that we've done as exclusives, and that's worked really well because we work with the manufacturer. They guide us in terms of the technical limitations and these types of things. We get to have influence on, some of the aesthetic aspects or maybe some other design elements, and come up with things that are really interesting for pen people. So that's worked really well. And that's what I see as the most obvious thing as to whether or not we brand a pen ourselves. If we did it, it would be made by, a particular manufacturer. And at that point, I'm like, well, why don't we just, co-brand it anyway? So I don't see necessarily the necessity to make a branded pen per se, if it's going to be made by somebody else anyway, but I'm never going to leave it off the table. It could always be a possibility.
Yeah, I get it. I think it would be like a really cool factor type of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
sure. But
yeah,
I don't have a lot of ego in it, honestly. Like I don't need to have I have the company's named after me and, my wife and all that. And so, so it's like, the name gets thrown around. I almost like don't even associate it as much. That sounds weird, but like, oh, it's Goulet Pens. Yeah. My last
You're
name
like,
is
wait,
Goulet.
that's
Okay.
me.
Yeah. But it's, I don't know. It's something, it's not for my own ego. So, I mean,
Right.
yeah, I wouldn't make a pen just to be like, oh, I have my own pen. It's like, well, okay. If it doesn't make sense, then I'm not going to force it. So, I'll leave it on the table for sure, but
Yeah.
I'm not like hard pressing because it's a tough business. It's a lot, any manufacturing business is pretty tough. So for me to try to make something that is as complex as a fountain pen, like from scratch, it would be tough.
No, I get that. I get that. Is there a new fountain pen company that you think us consumers should be on the lookout for? Like one you're excited about?
Get excited about all of them, to be honest with you. Yeah, I mean, TWSBI is one. I mean, I don't know what you consider new in the fountain pen world. Anything that's less than a couple of decades old is
Yeah, I guess
new.
that's up to you to define what new would be. To me, everything's new, obviously.
Well, honestly, that's just it. Like most, your average person, especially, I mean, we cater mostly to an American audience. Most fountain pens are new. Even companies that have been around for 100 years, they've never heard of these brands before. So, I mean, it's all new to them, right? So a lot of it is just exploring. I think TWSBI is one of the more exciting ones because they've been a disruptor in the last, decade or so. They've come up with a lot of very high quality, very affordable pens that look pretty interesting. But they were making pen parts and toys and other things for 40, 50 years before they came out with their own brand of pens. So like they had a lot of manufacturing experience and they just came up with the TWSBI brand of pens. So it's like, do you consider that a new company?
Yeah.
It's a new brand of pens for sure. But that's probably one of the more exciting ones. But in the fountain pen world, it's a little less about like which company or which brand is the most exciting. It's who's coming out with new stuff. What's the industry doing as a whole? Because, they've been around for a long time and there's, I don't know, some ways to innovate, but it's like, there's also a lot of very established stuff in the fountain pen world. So, a lot of the very established companies are equally as much a one to keep an eye on for coming out with new and interesting things because, it's kind of, they have a lot of experience to draw upon and they can come out with new stuff too.
Would you ever have like a physical store?
We get asked about that. And, that's been an interesting question with COVID life in the last couple of years.
Well, yeah. Yes.
Well, definitely not with all that going on. I haven't really had a super strong desire to do a physical brick and mortar store because it's kind of tough. There's just in our, I live in the Richmond, Virginia area. There's not a lot of local interest probably in a fountain pen. I mean, I'm sure there'll be some interest, but not enough to support everything that we're doing here. So it ended up having to be kind of like a hybrid thing. And then, it's really somewhat of a different business model, of having a physical in-person store, because then you have to have set hours and hire people to be there on the floor. That's very different than answering emails and chats and social media, right? So it couldn't necessarily even be the same people that are doing both. It's very different personality styles for each of those. So it would be really kind of, we'd have some of the same products, but it'll also be kind of like a tandem business. So haven't had as much interest in that. I'm sure we could do it as sort of like a destination store.
Maybe like a pop-up.
Yeah, we talked about doing a pop-up and stuff like that. It's been difficult because it's a whole different, it would be a whole different thing to do.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. And I'm sure there would be a lot of interest in doing it, but it would be tough because I'm sure if I did it, then a lot of people would want me to be there and other people who I've featured on videos and stuff like that. Yeah. And then it's like, then
it becomes something else.
Yeah. Like if I do a pop-up, it'd be great. Like I love fountain pen people, but it's very difficult because everything is just time. It's opportunity cost, right? So it's like, if I do a pop-up and I'm doing stuff in person, it's a great experience for the, few dozen people to get to talk to there, but then I'm not getting to put out a video or on whatever else that thousands of people could get to enjoy. So that there's always kind of a debate there. And I've leaned definitely more towards and just practicality too. With my kids are older now. So it's a little more practical of a conversation. When the kids were really young, it was like, forget it. Like, I just don't even have time. Like who would watch my kids, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So and Rachel, my wife, she's pretty introverted as well. She would never want to work in a, retail frontage store. So I highly doubt we would ever do anything like that. We definitely don't have any plans in the near future.
Yeah. I mean, I know down here where we live in Miami, it's really difficult to find a place where you can just walk in and walk out with a fountain pen. I only know of one, which is our neighborhood bookstore, Books and Books. Yeah. But they only carry Lamys.
Right.
So you're like, okay.
It's difficult. There's not, I mean, I even in New York City, which you would think there's a huge market there. I know of one fountain pen store, like one specialized, well, they're not just fountain pens. They sell other pens too, but like I know of one pen store in the entire city. There may be bookstores and stuff, kind of like, Books and Books that has, called a shop and shop, like a little kiosk or something.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
But even
Lamys and some ink.
Yeah. And so you'll have a little bit of that, but like a specialized pen store, there's just honestly not very many of them in the US because it is difficult. Everybody's attention is split. And now with post-COVID, it'll just be really interesting to see what all of our, social, cultural, shopping, whatever behavior is. It's yet to be seen. So we'll see.
But I will say, as much as we want instant gratification and going to a place and walking out with that pen, you getting a package from you guys is such a treat.
Oh,
it's like a gift. So it's worth the wait.
Great.
Plus you ship out super fast. So the 2 days that I'm waiting, I know that it's going to be worth it.
Well, that's what we try to do. Right. So like, that's been the compromise. We everything that we sought to do since the beginning has been, let's take the best of what you would get from like your mom and pop local, founder owned, store and try to maximize that using online and current like technology and social media and things like that. So, yes, I could have a physical store and I could sit there one-on-one and talk to people about the history of fountain pens and all that, but that's to one person. And, that one person is only going to retain but so much of that. And then that's kind of it. Whereas if I sit down and I shoot a video, it can live there for a decade or more. You can share it with others and it can go out there and a lot of people can benefit from that. So there's definitely some things where I'm like trying to take the, best of what you would get in an in-store experience and make it something that can be, perpetuated further, just given the geographic limitations that most people have in, going to a fountain pen store in general. Even if it's in their own city, it's still probably difficult for a lot of people to get there because people are busy.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I have one more question for you.
Okay.
We are a literary podcast, so I have to ask you, what's your favorite book?
Oh gosh, this is tough. I'm not a big, I'm not a big like novel reader. I have some reading difficulties and stuff that I didn't realize until later in life. I'm just a very, very slow reader. So I'm not, I don't really read
any kind of book. It doesn't need to be.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to get some context, but most of my reading that I've enjoyed the most has been, nonfiction, stuff, especially since I started this business. Oh boy, I felt like I had so much catching up to do, just from like a leadership and kind of self-improvement aspect. So there's some really good ones. Probably one of the most practical, kind of most helpful ones to me. I'll say it wasn't necessarily the reading of the book that made it my favorite, like from a pleasurable experience, but it was like one of the most practical ones that helped me out a lot was called The Advantage by Patrick Lynchione. That really helped me to define our organizational structure and learn how to like set up our meeting structures and just help improve the communication internally at a time when we really needed that in our company. So
I have not read that.
Yeah, it's so Patrick Lynchione has written a number of different kind of business books, but this one is kind of like a capstone one where he recaps a lot of his other concepts from his books. So that's a really good one. It covers like a full breadth of different topics about just, having an organization and a business, but gives some very practical things in terms of, the rhythms of having certain meetings and why you have these meetings, and talks about, the concept of disagree but commit, which is something that we do a lot in our team. So it's like if we have a meeting, we want everybody to commit to giving their feedback. And even if the decision that ultimately gets made isn't your thing, you still got to have your piece said, you understand. And even if you don't agree with the ultimate thing, that it's been taken into consideration and you're still going to commit to the decision that's made. So there's concepts like that are so important for running a healthy organization. That was one of the most practical books that's been helpful for me with our company.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll link that one for our readers, and I'll read it myself because to be honest, I had not heard of that book.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's been out for probably 6 years, 7 years, something like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brian. It was
You're
so
welcome.
nice to get to talk to you. And we'll have Goulet Pens linked and your podcast with Drew. I've been enjoying that also.
Good. I'm glad.
That's been fun.
Good. Yeah. So I can talk and talk and talk.
Oh, me too. We would be here all day, but
yes.
That's probably not for the best. If we want to stay afloat.
I mean, yeah, exactly. Yeah, we both have other things to do, but hey, we have a good time at least.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was so fun to get to talk to you and learn a little more about Goulet Pens. And I look forward to continuing to get my pens from you guys and seeing you all grow and bring back the interest in pens. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time, and appreciate what you're doing here too. You're building your own audience and sharing lots of great stuff that inspires people. So, props to you for taking that leap and making it happen. I appreciate what it takes to do that.
Thank you.
Chase your tail.